got a lot going on, starting with a conversation with Lewnes. Now, Ann is in charge of marketing for Adobe. And how many of you use Adobe products? That's like pretty much unanimous. So we're going to have an interesting conversation, and we're moving on. We're going to hear from Jason Calacanis, who just promised me backstage he would throw a JCal grenade. Toyota, TurboTax, and AppSavvy, and we're going to hear from Yahoo, and we're going to hear from SlideShare before we go to break. So we've got a great chunk of content for you, and we'll start with Ann. So please welcome Ann Lewnes. Welcome.
How are you?
We're here. So Ann told me actually backstage that she's also Greek, just like Ariana. But
it's an all-Greek conference.
It is, all Greek, all the time, except you don't have an accent.
No, but my grandmother
did. Which Biz can make fun of. You said she sounded like your grandmother.
She sounded exactly like my grandmother. Better looking, but pretty much like my grandmother.
So I want to start, I mean, Adobe is, I think, a much beloved brand, particularly amongst creators, people who make content. But you had a little bit of a tiff over the last year and a half with another brand that is much beloved by creators, which is Apple. So are you guys friendly again?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
How's it going? I mean, where do things stand between Apple and Adobe?
It's like so 2010, honestly. It's over, and
I am behind the times.
You are very behind the times. I think, you know, we had a tiff. I don't think anyone's changing their position, so there's no new news. The good news is that I think the market's totally breaking open. I think a lot of guys are coming in. You have RIM here today. They have a fabulous playbook. There's Samsung. There's Zoom. They did their little nudge at Apple on the Super Bowl. I think there's just so much kind of competitive technology coming out now, and a lot of these guys are using Flash as a differentiator. So I think we're in a really good spot.
Do you think that it is inevitable that at some point we will have Flash on Apple devices, or has Apple just dug into the point where that's never going to happen?
I couldn't begin to know that.
So, do you think someone knows?
I'm sure somebody knows, but it's not me.
All right. Well, that's unfortunate that I couldn't get that out of you. One of the things that I think makes your being here really important, given that we're focused on digital marketing, is your acquisition of Omniture. And I think that has shifted what Adobe means. So tell us why you acquired Omniture and how it fits into what Adobe's doing.
Yeah, I think when we first did it, actually, people were kind of scratching their heads and they didn't know exactly what we were doing. But when you think of the creation of content and the ability that we also had to distribute the content with Flash or PDF, the piece that was kind of missing was the ability to measure the content and optimize the content and monetize the content. So that filled that gap pretty nicely. And it's a pretty funny story because when we first decided to acquire them, the M&A folks, of course, were really excited, and I was brought into the conversation. And the only people more excited than the M&A folks was me, because we get to use all the tools and pilot all the tools earlier than everyone else. I think, you know, the strategic part of this acquisition is that basically marketing is the new finance. And the ability to analyze the data, the ability to understand, you know, what's working, what's not working, on the fly, iterate, A/B testing, and then understanding your marketing return on investment was always like this elusive dream for marketers, and now you can do that. So this has been, in my mind, like an incredibly important acquisition for the company.
Now, this sort of speaks to one of the things that I think is an interesting, if you look at the two sides of the media coin, you know, one side being marketers who are looking to align themselves with content and who spend an inordinate amount of time understanding their return on investment and using tools like Omniture, and then on the other side, publishers who spend an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out whether or not people are engaged with their content. The two sides don't actually speak to each other very well. Is this something that you're addressing?
Yeah. You know, so we're basically the people that have to put those two pieces together. So The publishers, I mean, the publishers are in a real bind, as you all know. You know, newspapers, print publications, they're frantic. Even broadcasters and movie studios are somewhat frantic. Everybody wants to get their content up on the web. They want to get an application up on one of the devices. And you know, they don't want to just slap it up there and have it look terrible. They also have to design and develop all these different devices, and you know, our job is really to enable that, to make it much more seamless, much more streamlined. We just introduced this new service called the Digital Publishing Suite, and we're working with Martha Stewart, Omnimedia, and Condé Nast. And basically, we're going to let you create the digital publication, but not just flat, static version of it, an engaging, compelling, delightful experience that mimics what you were able to feel when you opened up your Martha Stewart Living. People love that. They want to retain that brand experience. And what you can do with digital is not just give them a flat experience, but enhance whatever that experience that you had in print was. And so that's what we want to do. We want to make those experiences as engaging and as delightful as they can possibly be.
Now, let me ask you, because I asked Tim and Ariana earlier, so it just came to mind, you know, what do you make of the daily? Would it be better if it were Flash enabled?
Well, I think everything would be better if it were Flash enabled. But I actually don't think it matters. I mean, you know, I'm sure you'll ask me about HTML5 in a minute, so why not
you just cut me off there?
Why not get it out there? You know, for the record, we don't care. We don't care what technology you use. We want to serve the customers. If they want HTML5, we're going to make the best HTML5 tooling. If they want Flash, we're going to continue to optimize Flash. We're going to give you 3D Flash, HD Flash. If you want to create for any one of the myriad of devices, we want you to be able to do that. So we're very agnostic.
So let's go back to your brand. Would you be super happy if a year or two from now people did not equate the Adobe brand with Flash?
No. I think what I would be super happy about is if people equated the Adobe brand with a much broader kind of view than they currently do. Case in point. People have, in many cases, no real perception of kind of the totality of our company. They think of us as the Photoshop company, the PDF company, the Flash company, but they don't have I would say, a holistic view of kind of this whole workflow of creation. We just bought a content management system, all the Omniture tools. We have, obviously, the distribution tools. We have enterprise products. We have a ton of stuff. We are probably one of the most diversified software companies in the world, other than Microsoft. And so we did these focus groups, and we showed people what we do, and they were like, get out. They had absolutely no idea. So what are we going to do? We're going to do a kind of a brand campaign, if you will, cross-media, and kind of tell people what we're all about, because once we did tell them, it was pretty exciting to them. Once you tell them what you're doing.
So what is the headline of your brand campaign? What does Adobe equate?
Well, the idea is really about digital experiences. And so we're the company that enables you to create an incredible digital experience, whether you're a college student, a graphic designer, an online marketer, a CMO, publisher like yourself. That's what we stand for.
Creating digital experiences. Now, you have a, I watched your CTO give a talk at your conference, and he talked about the multi-screen revolution. Is this related to sort of the problem that you're trying to solve for both publishers and marketers, particularly marketers as content creators, which is you want to create beautiful content, but it's got, I mean, the splintering of distribution has gotten to the point where there's so much inefficiency in the market, and that's the problem that you're addressing? Is that
it's very hard, yeah. I mean, it's not just one screen, and it's not just a smartphone or a tablet. There are TVs, and I mean, you know, there are just incredible numbers of devices that you need to design for. So that's a big challenge for people. I'm sure a lot of you are facing this. So our creative tooling has to enable you to design across those devices very easily. The other thing that's happening is that people want to actually create on these devices. So you think of the devices largely as consumption devices. I read my book, I watch my movie. But if you're a content creator, you actually want to create on the device too. People are taking pictures. We think people are going to want to actually design stuff. And we are actually now working on products that will enable you to design on a tablet.
That
design
wasn't
on
like
phone.
a forward-looking statement or anything, was it?
It is a forward-looking directional statement.
Right, right. Because I think the creation on that space has been somewhat neglected, right?
But that's what we do, so
Yeah, yeah.
we're not going to neglect it.
Now, I want to ask you, if you look at your competitive set, and this, these are not trivial companies, some of the largest market cap companies in the world, Microsoft, Apple, who have technologies that compete with you for presentation and other things. Both Apple and Microsoft in particular own advertising networks. And if you look at your sort of, here's everything, from the creation of the content through the optimization and monetization, one of the holes, I would argue, is that you don't actually have a service that allows folks to make money from their content. You don't have an ad network. Apple bought an ad network and is now off and running with that. Clearly Microsoft has a strong offering in that space. Is that something that you're looking at?
I don't think so. I think, part of the reason that people like us so much is that we are not interested in competing with our customers. And I think that kind of neutrality is part of what we like about.
So you don't want to have access to media inventory that you resell?
No, I mean, what we believe is actually very powerful is the ability to have the data, not to own the data, but the brokering of that data, I think, is more in line with where we're headed.
One of the things that you talked about, and that when we spoke earlier, and also that Shantanu has talked about, is, and I don't think people see this as Adobe, but that you're a cloud company.
Well, we're becoming a cloud company.
Becoming a cloud company. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah. So, we started off as a desktop software company, obviously, but I think, obviously the market is evolving very quickly. We bought Omniture. That's part of our marketing cloud strategy. It's one of the biggest SaaS businesses in the world, growing very nicely, 20% plus year over year, and we've learned a lot from them. I think the second cloud that we have is the enterprise cloud, and we're becoming a fairly interesting player with something called customer experience management, which is basically creating great experiences for enterprises that connect to your back office systems. And we have products like LiveCycle, Connect, that are enterprise oriented, SaaS-based. And then the third piece is kind of the consumer cloud. And there we have a number of different types of offerings. We have a truly consumer offering, Photoshop.com, which is available on Android and the iPhone. We have like 15 million users. And then we have services that are being offered through Creative Suite 5. So long story short, I think we're evolving the company in that direction, but we're not turning our back on what we've been doing for the past 25 years.
Do you see Adobe moving to a place where, for example, Photoshop is probably one of the strongest brands when it comes to, pros and semi-pro photographers. But when it comes to how they share their experiences with others, there are a lot of other brands that seem to have lapped Photoshop. Is that something that you're going to go after?
I think, our brand, for the most part, has been kind of higher quality. I don't want to say professionals, because believe it or not, probably about 40% of the people who use Photoshop are not professionals. They're aspiring professionals. Do we want to compete with Picasa? Probably not. But if you look at Photoshop.com, it's basically a very simple version of Photoshop, and it lets you share photos, it lets you do some basic editing. So, we have an offering.
Interesting. Can you, I don't know whether or not you want to go deeper into this concept of customer experience management, but I'm sort of into it, like in a geeky way.
Well,
this idea.
I wouldn't want to deny you then.
Well, let's go have a cocktail party, and we're going to talk about CRM, because you will see me get excited.
I have to make it sound sexy. That's the challenge.
No, well, better you than me. That's why I'm asking you. So, can you kind of unpack that? Because
yeah.
I don't think it means a lot until you spend some time kind of explaining what it is.
Yeah. So, customer experience management. I would say the thing to remember about it is that experience matters. You know, enterprises, I think, are finally starting to get this. If you go to a consumer website for the first time, if you download a consumer app for the first time, the expectation is that this thing is going to be easy enough for you to be able to use it, right? Nobody taught you how to use Facebook. Nobody taught you how to use Twitter, hopefully.
Well, if you had teenage kids, someone actually did teach you how to use it.
They taught you how to use it well. But
they actually taught you how to control the privacy settings after they screwed it up.
Okay. So, but enterprises didn't have that orientation. And so I think, you know, today, in order to be successful, to be able to acquire customers, retain customers, make them love you, you have to have that capability with the experience that you have online. And so I would say there are probably 4 basic components to successful customer experiences. The first is experience design. You got to have a kick-ass experience. You need intuitive design. We're blessed at Adobe. We have our own experience design team, but there are, I'm sure, lots of capable folks in the room who can do great design for you. 2, you need a content management system. We were using Day, and they were so good we decided to buy them. That enables you to basically get the content served up that's most relevant to your customer. 3, you need online marketing tools. We were using Omniture before we decided to buy them. You're noticing a trend here. And then the last thing you need is something that connects to your back office.
I just want to know who you're using that you haven't bought yet.
There will be no announcements. And then you need something that connects all this back to your customer data in your back office system. We have a product called Lifecycle. If you have all those 4 things, you have the capability to basically create an experience that's completely tuned and interactive and intuitive, and that's what enterprises need to do.
Now, from the point of view of a marketer trying to tie together not just a campaign to campaign, but really an ongoing platform of sort of communication with a set of customers, can you plug into that? For example, okay, I'm going to do this really cool promotion with my NFL sponsorship, and you know I need to plug in other kinds of metrics, which might be retweets or I mean, is there a social element to this where you can measure that, you can put that into the system, you can understand that this person who came onto my site has 1,000 Twitter followers versus that person who has 10.
We're already starting to do that.
So is that something you're working on?
Yeah, and we're actually using it, back to my marketing hat, we're using it at Adobe. We just last year introduced Creative Suite 5, and we embedded hashtags basically in all of our communications so that we could effectively measure and track back to how many people basically came from Twitter. Did they ultimately try a product? Did they purchase a product? Yeah, you can do that now.
Yeah, you must kind of have a tough job because you sort of have to eat your own dog food when, you know, as
But
the head of
it's good
marketing
food.
for a marketing services company, you have to make sure you do everything that that you're trying to sell.
Well, it's also good because we can tell them when we don't like stuff.
Say more.
Not that that ever happens, but I mean, we pilot a lot of the new technologies, so we're not only eating our own dog food, we're guinea pigs.
It's a mixed metaphor that I get, that I understand. So you said earlier that marketing is the new finance, and when I think of finance, I think of Bloomberg terminals. You know, and actually the other catchphrase that's similar to what you said that I've heard is marketing is the new IT.
Oh God.
Well, yet when I look at Omniture data as a publisher, I sort of feel like, you know, I need an IT guy next to me to help me understand what's going on, because I feel like I'm staring at the matrix, but I don't understand it, you know? Or World of Warcraft, you know, if you've ever looked at that and you're like, well, how do you see stuff in there? Because it's just like so much data. I don't know if any of you have had the same issue, but is this something that you're addressing, which is how do you make sense of all of this?
Yeah. Well, one note just on kind of marketing being the new finance. I think marketers have to be more analytical and different than the traditional profile of marketers. At least when I got started in marketing, you were looking for really people with very strong communication skills. Not that those aren't important anymore, but now we look for people who are extremely analytical, have great understanding of data and data management. So I think the profession has evolved.
Right.
I forgot your other question.
Well, like, what tools do you think we need to pull all this together such that, you know, us semi-creative types can make sense of all of this data? Because, it is a bit, it's a bit frightening. I mean, if you look at the IT infrastructure that a major like AdWords advertiser has created, like eBay, it's an insanely large IT infrastructure.
I got so freaked out when you said marketing is the new IT that I forgot that other question. Okay, so I think the answer to your question is it's very hard because there's a ton of data pouring in. I'm sure you guys are collecting a ton of data. We have 350 million unique visitors per month come to our website. It's like a ton of traffic, a ton of pages. There's just data and data and data, and I don't want to see all that data. Not even our web analysts want to see all that data. So deciding what to pull out, what you want to see, what is important, what is actionable, that's like the biggest thing. Because even if I look at a lot of things that seem interesting, are any of these things actually actionable? That's something that I actually think about, my key staff think about, and I think we've started to do some, I would say, pretty good dashboarding. I'm sure a lot of you are doing dashboarding. Omniture actually has a dashboarding service, but deciding what it is you want to measure and then just really focusing on that and then acting upon that, that's what I think we're really starting to grapple with.
So I don't want to go back to Apple as we get to the end.
You don't.
I can't help myself. First of all, questions, please raise your hands because we're getting towards the end. I want to make sure to get your questions in here. But it's kind of the point of entry to this. There's been a debate about what does the word open mean? And you mentioned when we discussed Apple before that the world is exploding, right? There's a lot of different players now. How do you define that word open?
It's a loaded word. I think there are probably two definitions. If you're a developer of content, if you're creating content, Adobe thinks that you should be able to develop on whatever platform you want using whatever technology you want. If you're consuming content, we think you should be able to consume it on whatever platform you want using whatever technology you want so that you can view your content. To us, that's what open means.
Okay, because there was a more specific definition of whether or not some of the technologies that Adobe controls are open per se. So that's a distinction. I think it's important to make it. Do we have questions for the over here? Sorry, there's lights in my eyes. That is literally a mic runner.
Thank you. Just a question. It might be a bit off topic. I don't know how topical it is to what you're specifically talking about. Just for you, and how technical or how much of a technical enthusiast with the actual product were you before you became the marketing guru for Adobe? Were you bringing marketing kind of to the table from other companies and then learned the product, or were you a fanatic before you came up with the plan?
Well, I actually have only worked at one other company in my whole career. I worked at Intel for 20 years. I know I look incredibly young, but 20 years.
It's amazing they took you right out of grammar school.
They did. And so I knew the semiconductor industry very well, but I have always been enamored with technology. I'm certainly not a geek. I never wanted to be in IT, but I think our products kind of are at Adobe much more, for my taste, approachable, and people love our products, and so we all use our products. So it's a good fit for me.
Do we have other questions? I can't see out there. I wanted to ask you, just sort of as a final thing here, to give us a little bit more, because we've got a room full of marketers, and you're about to embark on, it sounds like, a very big kind of branding exercise for Adobe. Can you tell us more? Can you tell us what you're doing, what your strategy is, how you're incorporating, or if you're incorporating mobile, social, local, video? Yes. How much are you spending?
No, I can't tell you how much we're spending. This is the first time we've ever done a brand campaign, and when I worked at Intel, when I was very young, I launched the Intel Inside brand, the Pentium brand, and so if a semiconductor company could do it, for God's sake, shouldn't a company with these fantastic, beloved products do it? And it's going to be very soon, probably within a month, and it's going to be across all media, even print. Print is not dead.
I would not expect anyone from Adobe to say otherwise.
And there's going to be a lot of social. And part of working at Adobe when you're in marketing is you have to do kick-ass creative because you're the creative company. And so we spend a lot of effort on doing things that are extraordinarily kind of trailblazing in terms of the use of digital. So it's going to be big.
You can't tell us any details?
No.
Damn it. Well, I tried, guys. Are there any other questions for Anne before we move on? One over here.
So you know what I'll tell you. So
the question was the mix of spend against the channels.
Adobe has been way ahead in terms of our use of digital. I think something like 15 to 20% in terms of companies of our size of the mix is usually spent on digital. We spend normally 75% of our mix on digital. In this campaign, we're actually going to do a little print, which we normally don't do. And the reason that we're going to do that is in order to reach some of our audiences, largely C-suite, you still have to do some print.
Are you buying golf?
I am not.
That's why you're buying print.
So anyway, normally we do almost exclusively digital. We are going to do a little print. We're going to do some fun stuff, but social is going to be a huge component. One other thing I wanted to say on that.
Go.
Social is so interesting to me. I could talk about that for another 20 minutes. But I think the great thing about social is it's kind of a hybrid between marketing and PR. And so when we have these conversations about what's our social strategy at Adobe, I get the marketing people in with the PR people, which has never really happened before, because there's basically a blend now. They're kind of morphing into one another, which is super exciting.
And are they both in your group, right?
They're both in my group, yeah.
That helps, doesn't it?
It does.
Exactly. Well, unless there are other questions, please join me in thanking Anne for coming and speaking to us today.
Thank you.